Hey guys, it's Rich Jones from Gun.io. Today I'm going to be showing you uh, how to use Zappa, uh, specifically Django-Zappa, which is a project that I've been working on for the past few days. Django-Zappa is a way to run your Django applications in a serverless fashion using AWS Lambda and AWS API Gateway. So what does that mean? What is a serverless Django? So it's not really serverless. There still is a web server out there in the cloud that's serving you your web responses. The difference is that the server's lifespan is measured in milliseconds. The entire life cycle of the server is within a single HTTP request. So with a traditional web browser, the client makes a request, the web server calls the application, processes the response, encodes it, sends it back to the browser, and then it goes back to waiting. So you've got this server that's sitting there 24/7 just waiting for responses to come in. But with Lambda, the server is created when the API when the HTTP request comes in through the API gateway. That then creates an instance of the AWS Lambda function, which processes the request, returns it through the API gateway, and then the server is gone. So you literally have a server that exists in a matter of milliseconds. And there are some major advantages to this approach to web applications. It's actually quite revolutionary. So some of the advantages come from the cost, because you don't have to worry about keeping the server online 24/7. You're literally paying AWS by the millisecond. So it's vastly more cheaper than running some of the beefier EC2 instances. You don't have to worry about scalability ever again, which is super nice. With AWS defaults, you get 100 concurrent AWS Lambda instances per second, which puts you out of the box able to scale up to the size of 1/4 of Twitter, and that's an arbitrary limit. If you actually do start hitting that, you can contact AWS and have them raise that. It's also super easy to maintain. You never have to worry about, upgrading your operating system, patching security vulnerabilities. That's all taken care of for you. And really, there's no machine to take over because there's a finite lifespan on a AWS Lambda instance anyway. And it's also super easy to deploy, as we're going to be seeing in this little tutorial screencast thingy. So yeah, you can basically fire your whole sysadmin and DevOps team and never have to worry about keeping your servers online again. So let's get started. So as an example, I've built this little application called Spheres. I'm kind of one of these digital nomad people. I've been traveling a lot and I've been capturing a lot of these photospheres, as they call them, and I've built a little application that lets me share them online using Mozilla's new A-Frame framework, which is super nice, and I've open sourced it. You can find it on my GitHub Minzerloo if you want to follow along. But you can also use this with your your Django applications as well. It'll be the same process, but we're just going to be using this one as an example if you want to follow along. Okay, so let's get started. So first thing we're going to want to do is clone the application. Standard git clone, cd into the directory. We're going to make a virtual environment because Django-Zappa is based around packaging up your virtual environment and then sending it up to AWS. So we're going to call it env source env bin activate. You can use virtual env wrapper if you're into that. I'm old school. I'd like to have it in the directory, but it'll work fine with virtual env wrapper. Okay, so, and then manage.py migrate. Easy. This little run script. So this is still running locally. You know, I'm just kind of showing off how the Spheres application works. I'm going to upload a little photo that I took in Greece. It just uploads it to Imager. And there we go. So, you know, we've got this cool photosphere viewer. This is a photo of the Acropolis that I took. This is a nice one. But yeah, this is running locally. So now we want to deploy this to AWS Lambda using Django-Zappa. So let's go back to our terminal. You know, kill this. I'll reset it to make it look nice. And we're just going to do pip install Django-Zappa. Okay. Easy peasy. So the next thing that we want to do is, you know, add this to our project. So we've got it installed in the virtual environment. We're going to go into the settings. We're going to add Django_Zappa to the installed applications. In the middleware, as the first entry, we're going to add Django-Zappa.middleware.Zappa middleware. And then we're going to go down and we're going to add an entry called Zappa settings. And what we're doing here is we're going to define different environments, because you know, you're not just going to want to deploy to a single environment. If you're talking about a serious production web app, you're going to have your dev, your staging, and your production environments. And Zappa allows you to maintain all of those in the settings, so you don't have to reconfigure things every time, and you can deploy to any of them easily from the command line. So we're just going to make one. We're going to call it dev right now. So we're going to make an entry in the dictionary called dev, and it's going to have keys for S3 bucket. I've already made one called Lambda. I'm going to assume that you know how to make an S3 bucket. It's super duper easy. You can do it through the AWS console. And the one other thing that I'm going to define is the settings file, because you're going to need the settings file that runs on the remote server in addition to the one that you run locally for testing. So I'm just going to call that /spheres, because that's what it has to be a relative path to where you call the management command from, and I'm going to call that dev settings.py. Then I'm going to go into spheres, and for right now, I'm just going to copy our local settings to be our dev settings.py. You'll want to reconfigure that to match your deployed preferences. I'm not going to get into that in this webcast. We're just going to use the stock settings. So one thing that you are going to absolutely want to do is going to be changing the secret keys for all of your different deployments. I've got a little alias for making a new key here. And I'm going to open up the dev settings. I'm just going to change the secret key like that. Okay, so now we're ready to go. We've got Django-Zappa installed, and we're ready to deploy our application. So let's look at manage.py. You'll see that our Django-Zappa entries have appeared in the manage.py commands list. We've got deploy, which is for initially deploying your application to AWS Lambda and API Gateway. It'll set up the routes. It'll set package your application and submit it and set everything up. There's update, which doesn't touch the API Gateway. All it does is if you make a change to your code, you just package that up and replace the application that's being served by Lambda. And invoke is a way to run the management commands from Python manage.py on the remote server. So if you want to run any of these other commands that are configured on your remote server, you just call invoke. So because we called our environment dev, we're just going to do Python manage.py deploy dev. It's literally it. That's how easy it is to use Django-Zappa. With that single command, we now have an infinitely scalable, permanently hosted, zero configuration, serverless Django application that will run in the cloud for us. So what it's doing right now, it's taking the virtual environment and the application, it packages up into a zip file, and then sends it up to S3, turns that S3 zip file into a Lambda function, sets up API gateway routes. There's some magic under the hood that you can get into if you want to contribute to Zappa. If you're just a user of it, you don't have to worry too much. It'll turn that into something that maps to your Django application and then removes the zip file from the AWS bucket. And that's it. So this is taking a little while because I'm on Greek Airbnb Wi-Fi. So I'm going to cut it here, and then we'll come back in a second and show you what it's like when it's done. Okay. Okay, we're back, and it looks like our Zappa deployment has finished, and now we have a URL of our new hosted application. Now we should expect to see a 500 error because we didn't actually set the database up yet. But you'll see the Django is running, and this is the the old familiar Django 500 error. So the next thing that we want to do is set up a database for our Zappa deployment. So this is pretty easy. We can use Amazon's RDS service to run our database. We're going to launch a new MySQL instance. You can also use Amazon Aurora, which is MySQL compatible and super performant if you're running in production. But for our purposes, because we're just running a dev server, we can use regular MySQL instance, and we can actually use the RDS free tier as well, which is nice. So let's choose a free T2 micro. We won't use a multi-AZ deployment for our dev server. We'll call it Spheres 2 because I think I already have a Spheres 1, but you can call it whatever you want. Spheres 2, Spheres 2, Spheres 2, Spheres 2. We're going to put it in a VPC security group called default that I already have set up that allows inbound traffic so that we can administer it from our local machine. But you don't need to do this because you can run your commands using the invoke management command and then have your Zappa instance configured to be in the same security group or VPC as your database. But for right now, we're just going to allow all inbound traffic just so it'll be easier. And then that's it. Let's launch our database and view our DP instance. I'm going to pause it again because this takes a couple of minutes. Okay, we're back, and our RDS instance has been provisioned. So now we have an address that we can use. So let's copy this address from the AWS console and bring it into our local settings. We'll comment out this local MySQL instance and then use this local RDS that uses Django MySQL backend. We'll change this host URL to the thing that Amazon provided us, and we'll use the Spheres 2 password and name and username that we set up while we were configuring the RDS instance. So now we're using the remote database, but we're calling it from our local manage.py. So we'll call migrate again. Okay, we're doing our initial migrations on the remote database server as well. In the meantime, we can set up our remote server. So we're going to be using the remote RDS provisioner database setting. That's pre-configured here. Again, spheres2 is the name. Password was spheres2, spheres2. URL is here. The one difference that you should note here in your remote settings is that it has to use the pure Python MySQL connector, not the normal Django MySQL database connector if you are building from an OS X environment and not a Linux x86-64 environment. Okay, so now we've configured our remote database and our remote database setting. So then the last thing that we need to do is simply update the code, which we can do by calling python manage.py update def. Then that packages the project and sends it back up to S3. Okay, and we're back, and we can see that our project dev has been updated by Zappa. I will admit that I had to do this twice because I forgot to comment out the SQLite database instance on the remote settings, but now our code has been updated. So if we go back to the same URL that we were given before, we can see that our Django application is operating nicely on AWS Lambda. So now we can go back and we can upload one of our panoramas. So I'm going to upload the same image that we were using before and send it to Imager, and then he saved in our RDS instance, and now we have a nice shareable Django application link. Yeah, so you can see it's working nicely. Yeah, there you go. So that's it. I mean, it's that simple to deploy your Django application. Scalable, robust fashion. It's nice if you want to change this to be a domain name instead of this weird thing that Amazon gives you. It's super easy. You just go into the AWS API Gateway console and define it there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, give it a shot. If you have any feedback, you know, it's totally free and open source on GitHub. I'm happy to accept any contributions or feature requests that you have. Yeah, and if you're interested in working on this kind of project professionally, if this is something that you're interested in, you have experience in, you know, apply at gun.io and we'll match you with some excellent cloud scalability jobs. If you're a company who is looking to hire people who are experts in in cloud systems and scalability, AWS Lambda API Gateway, you know, tell us about what you need, and we'll be happy to help you build something awesome. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Bye.